3 times the senior civil service asked for his approval for action to protect Parliament. 3 times the Prime Minister withheld that approval. Why?
Exactly.
He knows very well that that threat was identified publicly in 2013 in a CSIS report when the leader of the opposition was responsible for democratic institutions, and they did absolutely nothing, Mr. Speaker.
And Mr. Speaker, I can't believe the following needs to be said. Parliamentarians' duty is not to a foreign state, but to the people of Canada.
It's time to name names. That's the Tories' call on the government today after a committee of parliamentarians with top secret clearance reported that some of their peers, that's MPs and senators, have wittingly aided foreign states. But the government is staying quiet, saying it's all up to law enforcement at this point. Let's bring in the front bench. Saïd Salvem, Gary Mar, Carl Bélanger, and Marika Walsh. At the top of the hour, we did get a statement, Marika, from the RCMP saying basically not going to comment on whether or not we are investigating stuff. We know some of the stuff that was in the report, but not all of it. And essentially, we do have foreign interference investigations going on. You were up on the Hill today, the early part of the day, before question period, before the Tories started asking about this, which they didn't do yesterday, just Jagmeet Singh from the NDP did. What was your experience in trying to get people to talk about this, which seems like it's an insane story, but doesn't feel like it on the Hill?
Yeah, it seems like they all want to keep their own distance from it. You know, you see that even in Michael Chong's quotes today in question period. His party doesn't want to act. They want somebody else to act, right? And that is the rebuttal that he's now getting, that the Conservatives are now getting from the Liberals. You could also get the briefing. You could also decide to make some actions based on that. I think part of it is diaspora politics. Part of it is that it didn't play well politically when the Tories did make this a big deal last year. But I think it raises a lot of questions, given how much emphasis and time they put into this last year, that they are now keeping it at such a distance. None of the MPs this morning, more Liberals talked about it this morning on Parliament Hill than Conservatives who talked about it. And to be honest, most cabinet ministers on the government side also seem to want to downplay it. And from the RCMP statements, it's sort of the sense of official Ottawa wants you to know everything's fine.
Yeah.
Without disclosing more.
Yeah. Just like, why are you making a big deal out of it, Saïd? And look, I understand we've spoken on this panel on frequent occasions about how foreign interference last year dominated headlines but didn't move the dial for any political party. That instead, when the Tories started focusing on cost of living issues, that's when they saw the popular opinion polling for them start to change as well. But this does not feel like the same conversation we were having a year ago. Like, this is I can't imagine in the States, you say some senator or Congress people are acting on behalf of foreign entities, hostile, I should say, foreign state actors who are acting against our national interests, and everyone kind of shrugs their shoulders.
Yeah, exactly. And when you say hostile, oftentimes that alludes to or implies treason. So these are very serious accusations, and it's starting to pick up some steam. There's a lot of talk about this, especially on digital and social media around this topic. So the fact that it's starting to pick up steam, people are wanting to know who essentially these parliamentarians are. Now, it makes sense from the perspective of various parties to not mention those parliamentarians, especially if members of their own parties are implicated. Because at the end of the day, if they are, you could have a Han-Dong situation where calls for resignation happen, or they get booted out of caucus as a result of that. So it could be very sticky. But for the viewers out there to know, NSICOP, which is the committee that is looking into this, is a multi-partisan committee. So it could very well be that many parties are implicated here, and that could be the reason why they don't want to name names. At the end of the day, this is a very serious issue that could also affect future elections as well. So this is something that they do have to get a wrap on relatively quickly, and hopefully they do.
And look, I think a part of me, Gary, really understands the hesitancy to name names from all parties, only because what we know is that this intelligence, which comes from CSIS, so it's not nothing, implicates certain parliamentarians. If you don't have proof of treason, you probably shouldn't be accusing someone publicly of it. But what I don't understand is why all the parties are not looking at Canadians and saying this is a massive deal. We are so rocked to think this is possible, and we're going to investigate as much as we can on our ends. We're going to, no bounds in trying to figure out if this is actually happening and who is doing it. Like, why not convey that to Canadians?
I think that's a very good idea. I mean, looking at it from a nonpartisan point of view, right now, there's a growing distrust of government institutions, and I think this just makes it worse. And I think all parliamentarians, regardless of what political stripe, should take this issue seriously, because ultimately it serves everybody better, all parties better, if if they're concerned about the strength of our democratic institutions. As I've said before, there's a lot of things that people are accustomed to in Canada that that are made in China, but election results should not be among them. That's just one of many different issues that may be part of this report. And I think that an all-party committee working on this should really be focused on it. Now, whether you can get whatever legislative changes need to be done, if any, before the next election remains to be seen. But I would think that the Canadian public would be interested in rooting this out, and take your partisan interests aside about what members may be named from your party. For the good of the nation, everybody should be interested in this issue and should be supporting the idea that if there is bad behavior going on with foreign interference with our democratic system, we should all be focused on getting that fixed.
And maybe at its most basic level, Carl, Canadians should know in the next election if they're voting for someone who's committed treason.
Well, I would think so.
Call me crazy, but right?
Kind of a thing that you should probably be aware of. But I understand the reluctance. I mean, at the same time, you don't want to fall into kind of a witch hunt of any kind of McCarthyism where you go after people for political expediency. Because there are precedents in Canada. Quebec MP Fred Rose in the 40s was kicked out of Parliament because he was accused of being a spy for the Soviet Union. So it happened before. We've been there. So there are ways to deal with it. And it seems clear that they don't want to deal with it because there's probably too many, and the evidence is probably even stronger than it was in the case of Fred Rose. So they don't want to deal with it for fear of being guilty by association, maybe. They don't want to be tainted by the fact that, one member of the party, and we were aware, because, in these caucus, I'm sure that the people have heard, they've seen, they have doubts, suspicions about who these people are. And I can't imagine that this cannot be aired out before the election. And I don't know that we can count on the RCMP to deliver any kind of result before the election. So I'm not sure what's going to happen, frankly, but it's very concerning.
Just a really quick follow-up. Can the NDP play a pivotal role here? They seem to have the least blood on their hands, if I could put it in a crass way. Jagmeet Singh was basically the only politician yesterday saying anything about it. Can they leverage their relative spot, vis-a-vis the Liberals to push something more here?
Well, that's interesting because it's not part of the governance agreement with the Liberals, right? But can you play that card and say, well, if you don't move on this, we've lost confidence in your government because you're protecting treasonous behavior, spies, etc. I think that's a reason to lose confidence in the government if that's what they're doing. So I guess they could play that game too, but will they? I have some doubts about that.
Do you have any sense of that?
I don't. I mean, you tried with Peter Julian at the top of your show, and it did not look like that was something that was going to lead to pressure on the government to do more as sort of like a do this or else kind of moment. I don't see that coming. The NDP also is not ready for a do this or coming moment because they're not ready for an election. I think broadly, the question for the Liberals is they're the ones who set up NSICOP, this parliamentary committee that is all-party committee. They did their job, as Gary just described, a bipartisan committee coming to conclusions, releasing what they can, and then it's up to government to act. The Liberals set this up. The Liberals pointed to this committee last year when my colleagues and others were reporting on foreign interference as the place to have this. Now they have the report and they say, sort of, it's actually not that big a deal.
Well,
or if it is a big deal,
disagree
we just disagree with it, or we're not telling you what we're doing with it. Either way, they clearly are just hoping at this point that this goes away. They're not answering questions on whether they'll expel MPs. They're not answering questions about what the review is that Chrystia Freeland announced yesterday but has disappeared today. There's just sort of this black hole that they want to put everything in.
Yeah, that's about it. Well, I have to take a black hole commercial break. Thank you, everyone. This was the opposite of a black hole. Appreciate the discussion. As always, our front bench, Saïd Salvem, Gary Mark, Carl Bélanger, and Marika Walsh.